My name is Lauren Haynes. I'm 34 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, and I need to start by saying something that took me a long time to accept. The most devastating betrayal of my life didn't come from a stranger. It didn't come from a bad boyfriend or a toxic coworker or someone I met on the internet. It came from my little sister. And she didn't betray me once, in one ugly moment I could point to and process and eventually move past. She betrayed me slowly, quietly, systematically for 12 years. And she was so good at it that I had absolutely no idea, until the day her resume landed on my desk. If you've ever had the ground just disappear beneath you, like 1 minute everything makes sense and the next minute nothing does, you know exactly what that Tuesday morning felt like. And if you haven't, I genuinely hope you never do. Because there is nothing in this world quite like looking at a piece of paper and realizing that the life you thought was yours wasn't entirely yours at all. I'm going to tell you everything. But I need you to understand something first. This story isn't just about identity theft. It's about a family that chose one daughter over the other for so long that the other daughter eventually decided to just become her. Let me take you back to the beginning. Part 1, normal life, the stat. I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio, second of 3 kids. My older brother Marcus, me in the middle, and then Danielle, 4 years younger, the baby, and from the moment she arrived, the absolute center of my parents' universe. Now, I know how that sounds. Every older sibling thinks the younger one was more loved. I get it. But I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying my parents were monsters. They weren't. They were just partial. In that quiet, unconscious way that still does enormous damage, Danielle was beautiful. I mean, genuinely, objectively stunning. Big brown eyes, this effortless smile, the kind of kid that strangers would stop my mom in the grocery store to compliment. And I was fine. I was normal. Brown hair, a little too serious. Always had my nose in a book. I made good grades. I was responsible. I didn't ask for much. Which, it turns out, was the problem. Because when you don't ask for much, people stop offering. My parents celebrated Danielle's average report cards with dinners out. My honor roll certificates went on the refrigerator for a week before disappearing. When Danielle got cut from the junior varsity volleyball team, my mom cried with her and bought her ice cream and called the coach to complain. When I didn't get the lead in the school play, my dad said, "Well, maybe drama isn't your thing," and went back to watching TV. I'm not telling you this to get sympathy. I made peace with most of it a long time ago. I'm telling you because you need to understand the soil this story grew in. Because what Danielle did to me didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a family where I had already been taught, very thoroughly, that I was the less important one. I left for college at 18 on a partial scholarship and some student loans. I studied business administration. I worked part-time at a campus coffee shop. I tutored underclassmen on weekends. And I graduated in 4 years with a 3.7 GPA and exactly 0 fanfare from home. My parents came to graduation. They took exactly 3 photos. One was blurry. After that, I moved to Austin for a job at a mid-sized tech company, worked my way up over the next decade, and eventually became a senior HR manager with a team of 5 and a salary I was genuinely proud of. My life was not glamorous, but it was mine. I built it with my own 2 hands, out of nothing, with no help, no inheritance, no safety net. And that mattered to me more than I can say. Danielle, meanwhile, had a rougher path. She dropped out of community college after 1 semester. She went through a string of jobs, waitressing, retail, A brief attempt at real estate that fizzled out. She moved back home at 22. She borrowed money from my parents regularly. She had a long relationship with a guy nobody in the family liked, which ended badly, and then she kind of just floated for a few years. I felt sorry for her. Genuinely. We weren't close, we'd never really been close, but she was still my sister, and I wanted her to find her footing. Whenever she called, which wasn't often, I was warm. I asked how she was doing. I meant it. I had no idea she'd been studying my life like a blueprint. Part 2. Early things I dismissed. The first weird thing happened about 6 years ago, though I didn't recognize it as weird at the time. I was trying to refinance my car loan, and the bank flagged a discrepancy in my credit file. There was an address in Columbus, Ohio, attached to my social security number that I didn't recognize. The loan officer said it was probably just an old file mix-up, a data entry error, super common. I called the credit bureau, filed a dispute, the address got removed, and I forgot about it. Looking back now, that was Danielle. She had rented an apartment using my SSN. About 2 years after that, I got a piece of mail forwarded to me from my parents' house. A collection notice from a medical provider in Ohio. I'd had no medical care in Ohio since I was 18. I spent 3 weeks on the phone sorting it out, disputing the debt, eventually getting it removed. I remember telling a friend, someone out there has my social security number, and I can't figure out who. I never once considered it was my sister. And then, maybe 3 years ago, something stranger happened. A former college acquaintance of mine, a woman named Becca, who I'd stayed loosely in touch with through social media, sent me a message that said, "Hey, random question, are you living in Columbus now? Someone told me they ran into you at a bar, and you were talking about working in healthcare management. That doesn't sound like you at all. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay." I told Becca she must have mixed me up with someone else. I was in Austin. I worked in HR. I laughed it off. I know. The signs were everywhere. But here's the thing about identity theft when it's committed by a family member. Your brain just refuses to go there because you're not on guard against the people you love. You're on guard against strangers. And Danielle had been in the background of my whole life, quiet and familiar, and my mind simply would not draw that line until the resume. Part 3, the moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning in March. I came into the office early, which I usually do. I had a hiring cycle open for a mid-level HR coordinator position. Nothing senior, but a solid role with good benefits. And we'd gotten almost 200 applications over the 2 weeks the posting was live. I'd been working through the stack with my assistant, Priya, flagging the strongest candidates for phone screens. Priya had already done a first-pass sort and left a short list on my desk. I sat down with my coffee, opened the folder, and started reading. The third application in stopped me cold. The name at the top was Lauren M. Haynes, my name, my middle initial. I actually laughed out loud. One of those short, confused laughs where your brain hasn't caught up to the situation yet. I thought it was some kind of filing error. I thought maybe Priya had accidentally put my own contact info in the stack as a test document or something. But then I kept reading. The address was in Columbus, Ohio. The educational history listed a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Ohio State University, graduating year 2012. I did not go to Ohio State. I went to the University of Dayton, but the graduation year was right, my graduation year. The work history started with a position at a healthcare management firm in Columbus. Entry level 2013, which would have been right after I graduated. And then listed under professional certifications was a PHR credential, a professional in human resources certification. I have that certification. I earned it in 2017. My hands had gone completely still on the desk. I scrolled down to the bottom of the application. There was a photo. It was Danielle. I sat there for what felt like a long time. My coffee went cold. I could hear Priya laughing at something down the hall, and someone's phone ringing, and the ambient sounds of a normal Tuesday morning, and I was completely untethered from all of it. She had applied to work at my company, using my name, my credentials, my degree, or something close enough to it to pass a background check if no one looked too hard. She had built an entire parallel career under my identity, and then she had walked it straight through the front door of my life. I closed the folder. I sat back in my chair, and I thought very clearly, she has no idea I'm the hiring manager. That thought changed everything. Part 4. The investigation. I did not panic. I want you to know that because people always ask. They say, how were you not hysterical? And the truth is, I don't entirely know. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was something colder. A clarity that comes when the thing you've been vaguely dreading without knowing it finally materializes into something solid. I took the application home that night. I did not tell Priya. I did not tell my boss. I just took it home and I started digging. I pulled my credit reports from all 3 bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, Experian. I went through every line, and once I knew what I was looking for, once I had Danielle's name in my mind as the person I was tracking, the picture assembled itself with horrifying clarity. The address in Columbus I disputed 6 years ago. A credit card opened in my name in 2016 that had been paid off but was listed as authorized user removed, meaning someone had added themselves and then been removed, probably when the card was closed. A second collection notice, one I'd never seen, from a dental office. 2 inquiries from employers running background checks in 2018 and 2020. That I had no memory of. She had been living a whole life under my name. I called a lawyer the next morning. A friend of mine had used an attorney named David Park for a contract dispute a couple years back, and I trusted her judgment. I called David before work, left a voicemail explaining the broad strokes, and he called me back within the hour. He told me what I already suspected. What Danielle had done was federal identity theft. It was also fraud. Specifically, she had fraudulently represented herself to employers using false credentials. The PHR certification alone, which she'd listed but clearly never earned, was a misrepresentation that could constitute fraud in a hiring context. David asked me what I wanted to do. And that's the question, isn't it? Because here's what I was sitting with. This was my sister, my complicated, troubled, golden child who never quite found her footing sister. Part of me, the part that had spent 30 years being the responsible one, the forgiving one, the one who didn't make a scene, wanted to call her, wanted to give her a chance to explain, wanted, God help me, to protect her from the consequences. But I kept coming back to 12 years. Not one's mistake, not a moment of desperation that spiraled. 12 years of deliberate, sustained theft. 12 years of building a career, establishing a credit history, renting apartments, being hired and trusted and compensated, all while wearing my name like a costume. 12 years during which she had watched me live my real life, had spoken to me on holidays, had wished me happy birthday, and had never once said a word. I told David I wanted to document everything first. I didn't want to tip her off. I wanted the full picture before I made a single move. He said that was the right call. Part 5, What I, and how deep it went. Over the next 3 weeks, David and I built a file. He had a contact at a forensic accounting firm he sometimes worked with, and together they helped me trace the scope of what Danielle had done. It was worse than I thought. She had used my social security number to gain employment at 4 separate companies over 11 years, always in HR or administrative roles where my credentials made her a credible candidate and my certification gave her a professional edge. She had earned real salaries. She had, ironically, gotten quite good at the work. A couple of her former employers, when David's contact made discreet inquiries, described Lauren Haynes as a solid, reliable employee. She had also used my identity to open 2 credit cards, both now closed, and to secure a personal loan in 2019 for just under $8,000. The loan had been repaid, but it had still been taken out fraudulently. She had rented 3 apartments across Columbus using my name and SSN, always paying her rent on time, which was almost a relief, because at least she hadn't trashed my credit. But the most painful part, the part I keep coming back to even now, was the degree. Danielle had obtained a fraudulent transcript from the University of Dayton, not Ohio State. I'd misread the application. She had actually used my actual school, showing that Lauren M. Haynes had graduated in 2012 with a GPA just below mine. She had paid someone online for a fake diploma. She had used that diploma along with my SSN and a manufactured reference history to build the foundation of an entire professional identity, my degree. The degree I worked for, that I took out loans for, that I stood on that stage in the sun and received and cried a little over because I had done it completely on my own. She had photocopied my life and walked right into it. I called my mom when I had the full picture, not to warn her, not to get her on my side. I called because I needed to know if she knew. The conversation was one of the hardest of my life. My mom didn't know everything, but she knew enough. She knew Danielle had used my SSN once, years ago, for something she described as an emergency. She knew Danielle had listed me as a reference on job applications without asking. She said she'd told Danielle to just be careful and had assumed it had stopped. She had not told me. She asked me to please think about what a legal situation would do to Danielle. I thought about what 12 years of silence had done to me. I told her I'd be in touch, and I hung up. Part 6. The confrontation on my Tums. Here's where I need you to understand something about how I think. Because what I did next, some people in my life called cold. They called it calculated. They called it, and I'm quoting my mother directly here, unnecessarily cruel. I don't see it that way. I see it as the first time in my life I refused to shrink. I scheduled Danielle for a phone screen. I had Priya make the call using the company's standard intake process. Priya knew nothing unusual was happening. As far as she was concerned, Lauren M. Haynes of Columbus, Ohio, was a promising candidate for the HR coordinator position. She scheduled the call for a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks out. I used those 2 weeks to finish everything with David. We had filed a report with the FTC. We had documentation of every instance of fraudulent use we could substantiate. We had consulted with a local prosecutor's office about the scope of what had occurred. David advised me that the moment I confronted Danielle in any forum, she was likely to lawyer up and the window for gathering additional information would close. So we made sure we had everything we needed first. And then Thursday came. I sat in a conference room by myself, door closed, laptop open, legal pad in front of me. I dialed in as myself, Lauren Haynes, Senior HR Manager, and I waited for the other Lauren Haynes to pick up. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was bright, professional, slightly nervous the way people are before job interviews. She said, "Hello, this is Lauren Haynes." I let one beat of silence go by. Then I said, "Hi, Lauren. This is Lauren Haynes." Another beat. I'm the Senior HR Manager here. And I'm also the woman whose identity you've been using for the last 12 years. The silence on the other end of that line was one of the loudest things I have ever heard. She didn't hang up. I'll give her that. She could have hung up. Instead, she said, and I wrote it down because I knew I'd need to remember it exactly. She said, "Lauren, I can explain." And I said, "I know you can, but I don't need you to. I already know everything." What followed was 27 minutes of the most extraordinary conversation I have ever had with another human being. She cried. She apologized genuinely, it seemed, though I was too numb to fully receive it. She explained that she had started small, just using my SSN for an apartment application when she was desperate and had bad credit. And then it had worked, and then she hadn't known how to stop, and then years had passed, and by then the hole was so deep she couldn't see the top of it. She said, "I always thought of it as borrowing, like I was borrowing your life until I could build my own." I said, "You were stealing. There's a difference." She asked me what I was going to do. I told her that was no longer up to me, that the FTC report had already been filed, that the documentation was with an attorney, that what happened next was between her, her own lawyer, and the relevant authorities. And then I said the thing I had been rehearsing in my head for 2 weeks. I said, I spent 30 years being the sister nobody worried about. I want you to know that the reason nobody worried about me is because I was doing the work. Everything you borrowed from me, I earned. And you knew that. You knew it, and you used it anyway. She was crying hard by the end of it. I wasn't. I thanked her for her time. I know that sounds bizarre, but it just came out, and I ended the call. Pot at 7. The fallout I told my company the same day. Not because I was legally required to, but because it was the right thing to do, and I had spent enough of my life doing the small dishonest thing because it was easier. I told my direct supervisor, and then HR legal, and I handed over the full documentation David had prepared. My company was, to their enormous credit, extraordinary about it. They pulled Danielle's application, notified the other companies in her work history where we had contacts, and connected David with their legal team to coordinate. They also quietly did a full audit of my employee file to make sure nothing had been contaminated. It hadn't. My record was entirely provably my own. The criminal process moved slowly the way those things do. Danielle retained a lawyer. There were negotiations. In the end, she avoided prison, which I had complicated feelings about, but she pled guilty to federal identity theft and 2 counts of fraud. She received 3 years of probation, a substantial fine, and a requirement to make restitution for the loan and the fraudulent credit activity. The criminal record alone effectively ended the career she had built under my name and meant she would have to rebuild from scratch under her own. My mother did not speak to me for 4 months after the plea was entered. When she finally called, the first thing she said was that she hoped I was satisfied. I thought about it, really thought about it, and I said, "Actually, yeah, I am." She didn't know what to do with that. My brother Marcus, who had watched both of us grow up and understood more than he usually let on, took me to dinner the week after the plea. We sat in a booth at this diner we'd gone to as kids, and he ordered us both chocolate milkshakes, and he said, "I should have said something years ago about the way they treated you. I saw it and I didn't say anything, and I'm sorry." That meant more to me than the legal outcome did. I want to be honest about that. The accountability was important. The justice mattered. But Marcus, sitting across from me in a vinyl booth with a melting milkshake, saying, "I saw it and I'm sorry," that was the thing that made me cry. The first time I cried through any of it. Part 8, Where I Am Now, the reflection. It's been about 8 months since the phone call in the conference room. I want to tell you where things stand because I know you're wondering. Danielle and I have not spoken since the legal process concluded. That might change someday. I genuinely don't know. She sent me a letter, a real handwritten letter, about 6 weeks after the plea. I've read it twice. It was articulate and genuinely remorseful, and it explained some things about her life that I hadn't fully understood. It didn't change what happened, but it did make her feel slightly more human to me again, and I think that's probably something. I have not responded to the letter yet. I'm not ready. Maybe I will be someday. I'm not in a hurry. My mother and I have an uneasy truce. She was never going to be the mother who said, "You were right and I failed you." That's not who she is. But she has been quieter. She calls more often than she used to, and mostly just talks about small things. The garden, a TV show she's watching, my cousin's new baby. I think in her own way she's trying. I'm choosing to meet her there because I'm tired of carrying anger, and she is my mother, even if she wasn't the mother I needed her to be. My dad never really acknowledged any of it, which is exactly what I would have predicted, and which tells you everything you need to know about the household I grew up in. What I want to tell you, and I mean this isn't a wrap-up line, this is the thing I actually think about, is that the most disorienting part of this whole experience wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that I had been so conditioned to make myself small that I almost missed it. The credit flag, the collection notice, Becca's message, years of small discrepancies. I explained all of it away. I didn't want to be the kind of person who made trouble. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to accuse someone I loved without being completely airtight certain. And there's something deeply familiar about that pattern, isn't there? Women especially, we're taught to doubt ourselves before we doubt the people who hurt us. We're taught that making an accusation is worse than absorbing the harm, that keeping the peace is worth the cost. I almost let 12 years of theft go unaddressed because I didn't want to be difficult. If you're watching this and something is nagging at you, some small financial discrepancy, some weird piece of mail, some story that doesn't quite add up, please go look at it. Check your credit reports. All 3 of them. Right now, not later. You can pull them for free. It takes 20 minutes. It might change your life. Or it might be nothing. Probably it's nothing. But please look. Otro. CTA plus emotional close. I've had people ask me online if I feel guilty, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I think I was too hard on her. And I've thought about it, honestly, the way I try to think about everything. Here's what I know. I didn't report Danielle because I was angry, or because I wanted revenge, or because I wanted to blow my family up. I reported her because what she did was real harm to me and to every employer who hired her in good faith, and to the system that depends on people being who they say they are. Identity theft is not a victimless crime. I was the victim. I had the right to respond. And more than that, I had finally, at 34, reached the point in my life where I was done being the one who absorbed the cost so everyone else could be comfortable. That is not cruelty. That is just knowing your own worth. And it only took me 34 years to get there. If you've been through something like this, not identity theft specifically, but that feeling of being the one who was always expected to be okay, to give, to forgive, to stay quiet, drop it in the comments. I'd genuinely love to know I'm not the only one, and if this story hit close to home in any way, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Lauren Haynes. It always has been, and it's mine.